Hello everybody, welcome back to Raptors Report. I'm your host Julian. We are doing another deep dive today because last week I released a deep dive on RJ Barrett that did pretty well and I got a lot of positive responses from it. So today we are going to be doing another deep dive, this time on Raptors rookie going into his sophomore season, Gradey Dick. And I'm going to be doing that today. I'm going to be showing you the results of the research that I've done and trying to give you a better look at what you can expect from Gradey Dick entering his second season. So let's jump in. One of the things that you have to examine with Gradey Dick was the fact that his rookie season was so uneven. And when I say uneven, I have not seen a rookie start their rookie season as poorly as Gradey Dick did and not be a bust. If he becomes a good player, he would really be kind of bucking historical trends. Usually when a player isn't very good and they don't translate to the NBA game, it becomes pretty apparent pretty quickly. And it looked that way for Gradey Dick. He started the season terribly. He went to the G League. He didn't play very well there either, but after the Toronto Raptors made the trades that they did, he turned his season around. So we're going to look very closely at the conditions that made that happen, maybe give you some hypotheses on why he was able to turn it around, maybe why he was so bad in the first place. We'll be looking at that quite a bit because I think it's very interesting. In terms of the turnaround, there is a pretty stark dividing line between when he was bad at the beginning and when he started playing better, which was right in the middle of January after the Toronto Raptors made the franchise-altering trades of OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam. And I think I've mentioned this before, and I certainly have mentioned it on my Twitter, but Andy Bailey of Bleacher Report released a list of all of the players in the NBA ranked first to last in terms of their advanced statistics, and he combined a number of metrics together to figure out who was the best in the league and, who was the worst, and finishing dead last. And this was done in December of this past season. Dead last was Gradey Dick. He was the worst player in the league up until that point. I do believe in statistics. I'm not a statistics hater, but I do realize that they can only give you a partial look at what is happening on the court. You actually have to look at the game tape as well. But in this case, the stats didn't really lie. Gradey looked pretty horrible at the beginning of last season. Really, the long and short of it was that Gradey Dick, who was brought in to be a shooter for the Toronto Raptors, that was his plus skill. He simply was shooting the ball very poorly. He was shooting the ball in the mid-20s from three-point range. So on offense, Gradey Dick is a movement shooter, and that means that almost all of his secondary skills are based around him being a strong shooter, that when he takes a shot, other teams have to respect it, and it goes in around 40 or over 40% of the time to keep teams wanting to guard him from the perimeter. So if you are not a good shooter, other teams are not really going to respect your shot, your movement off of the ball, your cuts, your closeout attacks, all of these different skills that are built around your main skill, which is shooting, all suffer as a result of that. And that's what we were seeing with Gradey Dick. He was missing most of the shots he took, and eventually teams realized this and stopped respecting it. So what the Raptors did was they kind of removed him from the lineup and assigned him to the G League, which was a smart move. This happens quite a bit. It's something that the Raptors use a lot with their prospects. They're not afraid of sending rookies down to the G League to get more reps, more shots, more minutes. All of those sorts of things are very beneficial for a young player. But when Gradey got to the G League, he did not impress there either, and in fact shot similar percentages to the NBA. He took a lot of threes and missed a lot of threes. And a lot of theories emerged around this time. In fact, Sam Decker, who is a shooter, he's gone overseas, he's not in the NBA anymore, but he was in training camp for the Raptors and built up some rapport with some of the media here. He said basically that the Toronto Raptors had changed Gradey Dick's shot. And that became a tempest in a teapot, and many, including myself, questioned the decision to change the shot of a player who you drafted for his shooting ability. And when Gradey was asked about this, he said, nope, same shot. This is the same shot that my mom taught me. He's been very complimentary towards his mother about helping him learn and develop the mechanics that went into his very good three-point shot. He said, nope, this is the shot that I have had my whole life. They haven't changed it. I know that the Toronto Raptors I heard a rumor that they were speeding the shot up, so maybe the mechanics didn't change that much, but they were encouraging him to get faster. He could get off shots with defenders not being able to close out on him. So there's some alternate theories there, but essentially what it came down to was that he was missing open shots. I'm not a huge believer in the change shot theory. It didn't seem very different to me when I saw the mechanics. And after the Toronto Raptors traded OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam, there were minutes for Gradey Dick to come back to the NBA out of the G League and start getting some reps. And that is when the transformation happened. So we will dive into the statistics and game film, and I will kind of give you my hypothesis as to why he was not shooting the ball very well at the beginning of the season and why he shot the ball much better at the end of the season. So let's talk about three-point shooting in the NBA, because three-point shooting is the highest variance skill in basketball. A low variance skill would be something that is consistent from game to game. So a low variance skill would be the ability to hit layups. Layups, if you can get inside, you are going to be able to make the majority of them that you take. In fact, it's kind of surprising when you don't make an open layup. On the other hand, players, even the best shooters, miss open three-point shots. And even if you look at the best shooters in the game, you will go to their basketball reference page, open up their game log, and you will see a lot of variation from game to game. So even if a player takes 8 shots one night, they will shoot maybe 2 for 8. The next night, maybe they'll shoot 6 for 8, etc. You kind of see what I'm getting at. Sometimes the ball goes in, sometimes the ball doesn't go in, which is why it's important to examine things over a large sample size in order to get a picture of how good a player is as a shooter. Three-point shooting is a lot like, in my opinion, hitting a baseball. Hitting a baseball is widely regarded as the most difficult skill in all of sports. The fact that you have to track and then make contact with and then make good contact with a ball that is designed not to be hit is incredibly difficult. In a similar vein, a basketball player being able to move to a spot on a court, catch the ball, and then get into your shooting motion, which has to be almost exactly the same as your practice shooting motion, while at the same time being guarded by a player who is trying to distract you and make you miss, that is a very difficult thing to do. And all of the small micro movements and macro movements and adjustments on the fly that you have to make is incredibly difficult. And as a result, I believe that a larger portion of shooting a ball is mental. The ability to mentally calculate every aspect of how you are going to be able to shoot the ball. It requires a lot of moving parts. And as a result, confidence and being comfortable is far more important than, say, some other skills, rebounding or being able to make a layup, dunking a ball, dribbling. The difference between being comfortable and confident and uncomfortable and not confident is very big when it comes to shooting the basketball, and many shooters have mentioned this. Either the ball goes into the net or it doesn't. And if you are being judged entirely on how many times it goes into the net, that is a tough thing to wrap your mind around. And it's easy to lose confidence in yourself if you're in a slump. That's why it's important to take into account situation, sample size, shot mechanics, all of the surrounding things other than just the ball going into the net. Now, in college, Gradey Dick was a very good shooter. He took a lot of shots, he made a lot of shots, 40% of his threes he made, while being the focus of the other team's defensive strategy. He took a lot of high degree of difficulty shots, like coming off of screens, dribble handoffs, all of the things that you would associate with a successful movement shooter, he was doing. Now, he did have a pretty disappointing March Madness. He only scored 7 points in the elimination game against Arkansas, and they were bounced out of the tournament, so he caught a little bit of heat there. But when it comes to single game elimination, it's really tough to judge a player, especially a freshman, for falling short. So I'm not going to judge him too harshly on that. When he came to the NBA and he struggled, it kind of looked like the Toronto Raptors had a Johnny Davis situation on their hands. I made that comparison. Johnny Davis being a draft pick for the Washington Wizards, who had a good college career in which he developed a reputation as a strong shooter, but when he came to the NBA, he completely flopped and didn't even look good in the G League. And that's kind of the comparison that was easy to make at the beginning of the season when it looked like Gradey Dick was on a similar trajectory. A lot was made about the physical routine, the fitness routine that the Toronto Raptors put him on that coincided with him playing better, but I think that a lot of it was mental. You can see pretty much delineate between when the pressure was on, when the Toronto Raptors were looking to win games with Pascal Siakam and OG still on the roster. I think they did give it one last shot to try and be a competitive team, so there was more pressure there. But after the vets were traded and the pressure kind of went down, Gradey seemed to take a step up. So perhaps the lights were maybe a bit too bright at the beginning of his career, and once the volume on the lights were turned down a little bit, he started to blossom. Now, for creating this video, I watched a lot of game tape on Gradey Dick on the NBA's website, where you can isolate all of the shot opportunities that a player gets. I looked into a ton of that, both pre and post improvement. And in the first half of the season, when he was playing poorly, I'm going to say this: the shot quality that he was getting was not that bad. In fact, he was shooting a lot of open shots and simply missing them. So the stats back this up. On NBA.com's website, I did this with RJ Barrett. You can actually look at how close a defender is when a player takes a shot. And with Gradey Dick, at the beginning of the season, prior to the trades, when he was taking shots, the majority of the three-point attempts that he took were wide open shots, and he only shot 18% on those wide open three-point shots, which is obviously terrible. So the shot quality that he was taking and getting at the beginning of the season was not that bad. It wasn't that he was forced into taking horrible shots. It was that he was missing the open shots that he did take. Many of the plays that the Toronto Raptors designed for Gradey Dick, where he would come off of a screen and then shoot the ball, were successful. They worked in that he got to take an open shot. Unfortunately, he could not cash in on those opportunities, and as we'll discuss later, that might have been one of the issues. So to lend credence to the theory that once the pressure was off, Gradey Dick began to play better, pre and post trades, Gradey Dick went from 18% on wide open three-point shots to 47% on wide open three-point shots, which is great. But there were also some adjustments that the Toronto coaching staff made in order to facilitate that and make his job a little bit easier, and we'll discuss that right now. So one of the biggest changes that the Raptors coaching staff and Gradey took to his approach to shooting threes was changing the location that he was shooting from. So prior to the big trades, Gradey Dick was taking the vast majority of his shots above the break. Above the break threes are easier for an offense to generate, but they are more difficult than corner three-point shots. He went from shooting just 30% of his three-point shots in the corners to, after the trade, he was shooting 42% of his threes from the corners, which is a pretty substantial difference. It was a smart move to get Gradey Dick to shoot more corner three-point shots because he shot over 50% from the corners after the trade, compared to only 32% from above the break. So he still wasn't very good from above the break when he was shooting threes, but he was much better in the corners and he was taking more corner three-point shots. And I can't quite quantify this with statistics, but one thing that I noticed both during the season and after watching the game tape was that Gradey Dick was shooting fewer shots after running off of screens. So movement shooting is all about the process of getting yourself open, and running off of screens, using dribble handoffs, and then shooting a shot makes it easier to get an uncontested three-point shot. The only problem with that is that it's more difficult to transition from being in movement into the motion of your shot. And I noticed that at the beginning of the season, the Raptors were running a lot of plays where he would be running off of screens, whereas after the big trades were made, he was doing that far less and being more of a stationary shooter who would catch the ball on kickouts and take a shot where he didn't need to relocate. So essentially, I think what the Raptors wanted to do was to rebuild Gradey Dick's confidence in shooting the ball. And the way that they did that was by making his job easier. Less running off of screens, more corner three-point shots, less above the break three-point shots. That kind of thing, giving him a diet of easier shots. And once that happened, you could see that he was a lot more confident shooting the ball. At the beginning of the season, when he had a bad shooting night, you could tell that he was reticent to shoot the ball. And I think that that happens a lot with shooters, is that when they lack confidence, you're going to start seeing them trying to drive more. And sometimes that's a good idea, but a lot of the time you just want your shooters to believe in their shot and to continue shooting even if they are in a slump. And I think we saw that a lot more toward the end of the season. Shooting is a huge part of Gradey Dick's game, but this is a deep dive and I want to cover the other aspects of his game as well. And I think that one of the encouraging things about Gradey Dick was his ability to drive the ball after an advantage had been created. So attacking a closeout and then finishing inside, or being able to get behind the defense, cut to the rim, and finish. When you are a movement shooter and you are hitting your shots and teams respect your shooting ability, they start to close out very aggressively on the player who is shooting the ball. And one way that shooters can use that is by attacking wild closeouts. Some players will try and, it's called running you off of the line. So if a player is killing you from three-point range, they are going to close out harder and harder and harder until they will be completely out of position once they have completed the contest. And Gradey Dick has done a good job of utilizing when players get themselves out of position on a closeout to attack the basket. And Gradey Dick isn't a fantastic athlete. He's average. Not a great athlete by any means, but he does have some advantages when he puts the ball on the floor. One of them being his ability to control his body, his sense of where he is in space. Basically his body control. Once he has his man beat, he'll get into the paint and he will attempt to finish at the basket. And he did a decent job of that, actually, finishing 64% of his shots from within 3 feet of the basket. So he did a pretty good job. A lot of those were uncontested because sometimes the defense, the help defense, especially on a cut, will simply just not be there and you will be taking an open layup. And that happens a lot with off-ball players. They'll get behind the defense and they'll finish. And he was good at that. He was good at cutting to the basket. But a lot of the time he would have to beat a help defender. And some of the time he was able to do that using his body control, especially his patented up and under hand changing layup. That's kind of his patented move. He would jump toward the basket, switch hands in midair, and then finish with the opposite hand on the other side of the basket. And he was able to do that as a very creative finisher around the rim to make up for the fact that maybe he isn't the strongest guy or the most explosive athlete. He did make up for that with a bit of creativity and body control. So that was very interesting to see. Next up, let's talk about Gradey Dick's defense. And I'll keep this section brief because right now, or at least last season, his defense was poor. He doesn't have great foot speed. He is big, but his arms aren't that long. He's not very disruptive. He didn't get a lot of deflections or loose balls. A lot of the hustle plays, he's okay at. He's not a complete stiff in that area, but he wasn't very good. On the other side, he was a 20-year-old rookie. And one of the things that is usually terrible when a player enters the league is their defense. Many players, unless they are essentially drafted for their defense, will be completely lost, especially with the speed and athleticism of NBA players. The first step of NBA players is unbelievable. It is very difficult to stay in front of them, and by and large, Gradey Dick was not very good at that. As I mentioned before, he's a taller player, 6'8". He seems to have okay instincts. His foot speed isn't very good. Listen, I don't expect him to be a plus defender in the NBA, but as it's very difficult to evaluate a rookie's defense. If he becomes an average defender, I would consider that a success, and I don't think it's completely unrealistic to expect that out of him. And that kind of dovetails pretty nicely into my final point, which is to talk about Gradey's youth, his inexperience, and what we can expect from him moving forward. Now, Gradey was 20 in his rookie season and will be 21 entering his sophomore season. And what that means is that he is a young rookie. He didn't get a lot of time in college to refine his game. He's not a finished product. He does have some interesting skills to build off of, but he in no way is a finished product. So this is a big reason to be optimistic. If a player shows promise in certain areas at a young age, you have reason to expect that they will improve, not just in that area, but in other areas as well before they reach their prime. That isn't always the case, though. A lot of the time, players will impress in their rookie season and then not really amount to an NBA player, especially if they have a significant flaw in their game. The perfect example of which is Michael Carter-Williams, who won Rookie of the Year, and then bounced around the NBA and fizzled out almost completely. And the reason was because he couldn't shoot the ball at all. So obviously this is not really going to be a problem with Gradey Dick. I think that he will at the very least be an average shooter in the NBA, but that's not to say that he doesn't have issues with his game or that he will be a complete player. There is a roadmap towards him becoming a role player, a player that can do one thing very well and perhaps contribute in other areas, but not a star player. There are other scenarios where he could exceed expectations, perhaps with his on-ball skills, something that we saw him work on in the Summer League, where his shot kind of disappeared again, but he was able to put the ball on the floor and get other players involved and finish at the basket. He looked very good in the Summer League doing that, being able to get inside of the defense, and it kind of looked like he was too good for the competition before he had his unfortunate ankle injury, which sidelined him for the rest of the summer. But he did show me something there. Perhaps that's something that we can expect from him next season. But growth is not always linear. Just because he had a terrible beginning of the season and then a good end to the end of this past season doesn't mean that he is going to continue his ascent. It doesn't mean that everything is on the up and up. It's easy to look at a player's trajectory and say, well, in this small sample size, things are trending upwards, they're going to continue going upwards, everything is going to get better, that kind of thing. When in fact, often it is a graph that goes up and then it goes down, then it goes up, then it goes down. But after a while, you are able to see a through line in the graph that indicates a direction that a player is moving in. And obviously after a player's rookie season, it's still pretty cloudy, but there's reason to be optimistic and there is reason to be pessimistic. So I think that my main concern for Gradey Dick this coming season is just seeing how legit his shot is. Is this guy going to be one of the best shooters in the NBA? Is he going to be a good shooter but not a great shooter? Is he going to be an average shooter? Or is his shot not real at all? I don't think that that last possibility is very likely, but when you start moving up of those ranges, it's going to determine how useful a player he is going to be. His shooting has waxed and waned, so it's been good, it's been bad. We've seen both of those possibilities, so that is concerning. However, when you look at his shot and the mechanics of the shot and the speed and height at which he releases the ball, it does look good, which is a cause for optimism. Another thing that I would like to see him grow and get better at are his on-ball skills, because I think that there's potential for him to improve in those areas as well and become more of a complete offensive player. And you could tell that that's something that Gradey Dick was practicing quite a bit of in this year's Summer League. I think that was an emphasis that he had during his training this offseason. So I would like to see how that develops in the coming season. In all, I am cautiously optimistic with Gradey Dick. I think that the second half of his rookie season gave me a lot of hope. I kind of had given up on him halfway through the season, but his second half of the season gave his career a second lease on life in my eyes, and so I'm wondering if he can build on that. The questions that I have are, how's he going to perform? Is he going to add something new to his game? What will his role be? Will he start or come off the bench? There are so many interesting questions when it comes to Gradey Dick, and I'm really interested in finding out the answer, as I'm sure that you are when the season begins. So that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a comment, please leave an upvote, please subscribe. I'm really always very interested in hearing what other Raptors fans have to say. And you can follow me at Raps Report on Twitter. I'm very active there. There's a great Raptors community. Come and join us, leave a comment, talk to me. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.